Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today I want to talk about the subject of cheap storage. A number of you may have been looking at upgrading the storage inside your network attached storage device, maybe an external backup drive, maybe on the laptop or phone that you're watching this on right now. And if you looked at the prohibitive cost of modern new storage and gone, how much? Because let's face it, it's one thing to look at your primary storage, your gaming rig, your edit machine, but when it comes to your secondary or even tertiary third tier storage, you might be wondering, can I cut some corners? And a number of you have been contacting me and Eddie on the free advice section and in the comments about buying second-hand media. Now, of course, there is the question of durability, but of course there is performance. There is price per terabyte and how often this drive is going to be working. And in today's video, we're going to be discussing the pitfalls, the good and the bad, about going for used storage. But in order to do this and actually test these drives, we're going to need some software. And partnered with this video, and we're being sponsored by today, are these guys, EaseUS. EaseUS, or EaseUS, pronunciation of your pick, are a software platform we have partnered with on the channel before. Sponsoring this video today, the last time we worked with them, it was on the SanDisk Extreme Pro failure issue, and this is when SanDisk Extreme Pros have started failing, and we were showing how you can use the software available from EaseUS to perform some level, either full or partial recovery of the data on there. And alongside that, if you've gone over to their Twitter, you can get yourself a free pro license for their software if you are a SanDisk affected user. We've got a link to this tweet in the description. Now they have extended the coverage of that promo as well. And you can go ahead and use their guide there that walks you through the whole issue, everyone that's affected and how their software has helped there. But back on to the subject at hand. Now, when you're looking at the cost of a lot of storage, one of the interesting things you do find with second-hand storage, more so than hard drives, SSDs see the most significant drop in price. And if you look at things like eBay, and particularly, you know, your second-hand outlets, your Gumtrees, your whatever, you do find that a lot of tech support websites, a lot of service vendors, when they get through drives, a lot of these hard drive and SSD vendors, they jettison their drives en masse from either large-scale laptops when there's recoveries, or at the OEM level, large numbers of storage drives. These end up going to third-party dealers, and that is how you find out on eBay and the like. When you look up the words like bundle, when you look up words like job lot, you suddenly find piles of storage media in large capacities as well. They start off pretty low, but it isn't long before you start coming across 1, 2 and 4 TB drives, as a lot of SATA drives are being utilized as the boot drive there. And often, you know, when it comes to the lesser known brands, it's as cheap to put in a 1 TB as it is a 512, because they're not utilizing particularly high-end drive media, NAND media there. A lot of them, the durability is normally 0.1 drive writes per day, pretty low stuff. And ultimately, these are drives that the amount of write that has gone onto them, because it's an OS drive, is negligible. Now, when it comes to buying second-hand media, I will also add that buying second-hand media for something like a NAS is a slightly different kettle of fish. Putting them inside a NAS, there is the potential for daily writes, unless you're using differential backups and little incremental backups, where the difference is only going to be very, very small over time there. And when you're going to wholesale whole image level backups, that is when the write and the overwrite, as you go through your retention policies of 10, 20 or 30 days, gets higher. But to give you a little bit of perspective here, we look at a SATA 1 TB drive over here, and the lowest we're finding is around $60. I was finding $50 to $60 for a named branded drive for a 1 TB. I mean, again, that's a laughable price drop on RRP there with regards to that Amazon, but that's a 1 TB drive there. Now, for that sort of money, you can go quite high, but if we look at used drives here at the 1 TB level here on Amazon, we're able to see straight away we can go pretty darn low there. And again, we can go straight to the 1 TB level there for the same price, but again, we are still talking about a new drive. So what if we want to specifically target used drives there? So that's what we do. We go straight into used drives here. We're going for 1 TB. Hell, let's go for 2 TB. What's the cheapest 2 TB drive we can get used? And again, we're seeing 2 500 gig drives. That's not really the same thing. We're seeing lots of drives here, but the price savings are negligible. They're not huge, but they are there. Now, if you go for something like a 0.5 terabyte, you know, a 512, maybe even a 256, where you're going to be running something like a true NAS system, where you need an OS drive, or you're going to be running, say, an unrated system where you're going to be using USB drive, there are other savings to be made. All of this sounds pretty promising, but just bear in mind when we're looking at all these things, we are still talking about used drives, which opens up the door to 2 main concerns for me here. Number 1, durability. Not knowing how these drives have been used, less so when it comes to USBs, but definitely when it comes to SSDs of large scale, not the USB drives there, durability is a factor. And if a drive is being utilized for caching, if it has been used as a scratch disk, if it's been used in a NAS, chances are the durability is going to be lower. And overall, that lowers the reliability of this drive for primary features, your business end stuff, or even your operating system. Because remember, if your OS drive fails, that's pretty much the end game here. So if you're going to look at second-hand drives when it comes to SSDs, just bear in mind that unless you're going to set some kind of RAID setup there at the baseline OS level in BIOS, I wouldn't recommend these for an OS drive. I would recommend them as an external backup drive, as your second or third tier drive, a local USB, because you're able to get such tremendous savings there for that capacity and find a very affordable way to add your existing NAS backup setup there. But what about utilizing it in day-to-day? What about utilizing it on your OS drive? Well, it would be, you know, fair to say that a lot of these drives, particularly the job lot ones, if we go for SSD job lot, chances are these have all come out wholesale from operating systems. These are going to be not only drives that have come out of laptops and the like as the OS drive like Windows, but more importantly, you will often find the reason it's the same drive is these have been pulled out from multiple of the same system. And in many cases, all that's going to be on that drive is a blank OS, maybe even just a Windows installer. And when it comes to the USB drives may be coming from educational authorities, from businesses. Ultimately, a lot of these have probably never even seen retail. They've just sat around waiting to cover. I mean, great example here would be a huge pile of phones. All of those phones, some of which are going to have storage, but not all of them. Now, what do we think we should do in order to learn more about this? Well, I tell you what I did. I went ahead and bought a big pile of drives, didn't I? I went ahead and I think we spent about 135, I'm sure it's on screen. We spent about 135, 140 nicker on a huge pile of drives. Move the mic. We grabbed ourselves a massive pile of SATA SSDs. Here is 10 SATA SSDs. We also ordered, I believe it was £8, it might be £10. We spent money on 8 USB drives here, and they sent 9 for some reason. We've got writing all over these drives. Some of these drives have got French GCSE written all over them. We've got this one that says Windows 11. It might be an installer or a boot drive. Some of them say Project A. These are all used drives. These could have come from schools, these could have come from colleges, these could have come from places of work. These especially, for them to get hold of 10 completely different SSDs, different brands ranging from Integral to Kingston to PNY, all of these drives we're going to use for data recovery. We're going to go ahead and use that EaseUS data recovery repair software, get these loaded on, and find out on these drives, when these were sold online, was there any consequences to that data loss? And ultimately, if you are going to be utilizing your drives and you're going to start selling your own hardware, how cautious should you be about deleting that for secure erase? And also, how easy is it for someone to recover your data? Let's head over to the test machine. Okay, so we've made our way onto the desktop here. We've got our pile of USBs and we've got our pile of SATA drives here. Just drop one. Hopefully that's not broken it. There we go. And what we're going to do is we're going to see if there's any data on these and if it's recoverable there for good and for bad. And of course, we're going to be using that sponsored software that we're using today, the EaseUS Data Recovery. Remember, it is free to download completely and you can utilize this software to scan the entire disk to see what data can be recovered, and you don't even have to pay to do that. There's even a limited amount of data that you can get back without even paying for it at all. And again, as mentioned, it is linked in the description, as is a link towards the tweet and the download directly for that software. I've already downloaded it. You just download it by clicking there. As you can see, I've already got the software up and running here, and I've got that Pro license as well. So I'm going to select a USB. We're going to go with this one here. It's the only USB in this pile that doesn't have writing all over it, so that might mean that this drive is completely empty. I've already connected some of these drives. None of them had data on to start with. So let's take this USB, and again, we've got a SATA dock over there for when we go through the SSDs. So let's get that plugged in there. I've not connected this drive yet, but it looks like immediately we've got our pop-up there on screen, and we can see that the drive has already been initialized, but also that there is no data on it. There was definitely a surface level format from the few drives that I've connected in preparation for this that seem to indicate these drives are fine for now. So we've got that drive on there. You can see it's already appeared there. There's our D drive there at 7.20 gig, and what we can do is just simply click scan, and that will start scanning this drive to see if there is data remaining on it there, and immediately there is data. We already have data. I'm not going to click anything too much, because one thing I will have to do while scanning all of these drives, which I imagine, if not days, is maybe going to take a week or so. So I'm wearing a Christmas jumper here. Let's see if I'm still wearing that in the other half of this video. I'm going to have to look at files before I share them here, not only because of YouTube and its guidelines, but obviously because if there is data related to individual people here, I don't really want to splash that and accidentally dox someone here on YouTube there. But on here, we can already see their system information. We've got lost directories here. Again, what you can do, and we'll show this later on in the video, is you can go into individual folders. There we go. There's some relatively safe files there. We've got some PDFs and stuff here. It says bank, so I'm slightly worried about that. And what we can do with here is you can go ahead and select a file. So, for example, if we go ahead and select one, we'll go for this one here. And if you wish, while the recovery is still happening, as you can see there on screen, you can click preview to see if you can do an early access preview to that file there, and it will try to do a recovery. And as you can see, it's unable to do a preview, mainly I imagine because it's a PDF, but for now, if we wish, we could recover that file live here if we chose to, and when we click that recovery button there, the background recovery will just sit there paused, as you can see there on screen. So if we come out there and we come out, it immediately resumes that recovery there in the background, utilizing that software, and that's going to keep scanning that disk. Now, the first 50% is generally the lighter surface level scan. The second half of the scanning is when it gets deep forensic. If you've watched the other videos, we're in more detail on that. But for now, immediately, I imagine these drives are going to be an absolute treasure trove of data. And if there's one big takeaway from this very early doors before we proceed forward, it is if you are going to hand your data in for any kind of reclamation, if you're going to be handing it in second hand, if you're going to be utilizing second hand data, whether it's your new drives that you've just purchased, to say new, your new used drive that you purchased, or you're handing in old drive, it already seems very clear that the surface level of this data and a lot of the cursory format is not going to be enough. But what we're going to do now is I'm going to fast forward to one imagine several days from now, where we're going to scan all of these drives just to see what level of data remains on them. And if you are going to be purchasing a second-hand drive, just how concerned you should be about how much data remains on these, because we don't know the state of play on this. I don't know if we're just going to find 10 copies of base level Windows 10 installer or something better or worse. But for now, let's fast forward after the recovery of these drives to see just what level of data remained on these disks. Okay, so it's 7:48 AM here in the UK, a couple of days since we started these tests, and I'll tell you right now, I can't really show you much of the results, but I can definitely allude to some of it. So I've gone through, I've tested all of the SSDs, and we're down to the very last USB drive you can see here. Now, I will say 3 of these disks were not used. 3 of them had nothing on them whatsoever, but the other ones unfortunately did contain a lot of quite mixed data of varying levels of security. So if we go into that drive now, we basically created one large recovery area for all of these drives, you can see here. Now I'm going to have to be very creative here with what I cover. So for example, just before I do that, actually I can see on this last drive, as I was testing this last drive, I would argue this is technically the most easy to share here on YouTube, but it's also the one that I would argue technically is kind of dancing with legality more than any other. And we look in the lost files there, it's not finished yet. Going to the PNGs, and it became very obvious very early doors that this was a drive that was filled with gaming ROMs, absolutely chocked to the gills with gaming ROMs. I don't know what this was being used for, perhaps in an emulator, but this one here, again, we could commit the recovery. It's not finished, but I'm not going to bother recovering this. But the main reason I wanted to show it was just so if we wanted to, just to show you that you can preview some of the recovery files if you choose, and you can dig in pretty deep in there to go into. If we go to the lost file types, we can probably find the original ROM files there if they're going to get dug out eventually. But again, all pretty much found inside there. And again, this is probably the least worrying drive of them all. So if we go for SATA SSD 1, we're going to bring that in nice and tight because I'm going to try to cover anything too revealing. So as you can see here straight away, this one we went in, and I'm not going to open these files, but this is someone's CV. It's years of CV and covering letters. Those documents contain pretty much all their information. I'm not going to show it here, but again, this was on a drive that went through second hand. If we make our way back, we go into another one here in the recovered database. We go into our SanDisk. Partition 2, go in, and again we'll bring that in. We always go into the lost, or we go into the tags, because that allows it to differentiate others files from one another. If we go into PDFs, we can see there's family tree information in there as well, so we're not really going to be touching that either. And moving into another drive while we were going through these, remember we've spent less than 20 quid, less than, I believe, was it £100 on these drives? I think it was 80 or something. It was a few days ago we bought that. We go into our next one. This is filled with audio files here, probably the easiest to share, I would say, but still nonetheless, these are still files I'm not going to be able to show and play here on YouTube for copyright reasons. Moving back towards the other drives, again, disk 4. I believe this was one of our first OS drives. So we had a few USBs, a couple of USBs indeed, that were USB bootloader drives for secure boot, but also being used as a portable USB booter drive. But there was also full USB Windows OS with program files and user files located on several of these SSDs over here. Making our way back into the pile, go into disk 4 there. I believe this is another one of the other one because the files are identical. Yes, they were, hence the copy. Next, go into lost files there. We go into tags, bring that in. Looks like we've got more Word files. And again, we've got people's names there being featured on. Not great stuff. So again, I'm not going to dig any further. But as you can see, as we go through these drives, there's a lot of people's data located on these that has just been handed in, and they've just not been secure erased. If we bring that in even tighter, in the vague hope, it's another, clearly this was part of the other ones that was just filled with ROM drives there alongside the other one. And moving forward, going to recovery, Toshiba, lost drives, go in, test one, and we'll end on this drive here. More PDFs, and again, we're going to bring that in, and I'll cut this out if it's anything that we're not allowed to show. And again, we've got a name. It's not on that these drives have been sold, and data recovery has been so easy done. Because remember, the software that we're utilizing today, that EaseUS software there, you don't need to pay for it to check those drives. So from this point forward, when it comes to buying second-hand drives, whether it is you're selling your own or buying some of these second-hand drives you find on eBay, really, really important that you secure erase all of the data on board. And if you're going to sell your own drives, that's even more important. If you're unsure, a bit of software like this is going to help you know how much data is on that disk. So let's talk about secure erase. What are the best ways to secure erase? Well, there's actually a lot of different tools online, varying on your skill level. So depending on your skill level, I would argue one of 3 different kinds of solution exist online. Probably the most techie known long-time one is called DBAN. DBAN allows you to do a very secure erase of the drive. It's probably one of the most trusted tools online, and you can use the free version to get the job done. But I will say you will need to create a boot drive in order to do it. It's conducted via the BIOS, so you will need to download it as a system image that you then load onto, a USB that you might have lying around, and then boot in BIOS into that drive to commit to that secure erase on there. And depending on your skill level and your client OS of choice, that may not be an option for you. Now, if that method seems too intimidating for you and you don't really want to go for a BIOS level boot disk in order to get that secure erase done, maybe your client system doesn't allow it, the next option to do for Windows users is to go into the bottom left menu, this does work on Windows 11, and type in the word disk part. One word, D-I-S-K-P-A-R-T. Right click the option when it appears and make sure you run as an administrator. Once you've done that and the command line window appears, type in the word list disk, and as you'll see, disks will appear that are on your system. This can include your OS drive. Bear in mind what you're doing right now can be risky, because if you erase the wrong drive, it can be damaging for you. The next thing you need to do is select the disk that you know is the connected drive. In my case, it's disk 2. Select disk 2, and what you need to do is the command clean all. Now, I'm not going to type enter here, but when you select that option, clean all, that will effectively write a 0 on every single sector of that drive. Now, the size of the drive will scope towards just how long that job will take, and disk part will remain open for the whole time. Once it's complete, it will suggest an option that disk 2 is now being cleaned. Now, on some forums, you may see that the word all isn't accompanied with that command. If you just select the word clean, it will clean that disk. But what it's doing is wiping the index. The data is still on the drive. You need to make sure that the whole disk is cleaned, and that is why you would add that command clean all and hit enter. But again, for a lot of users, this is going to be a very intimidating option because you're using command line. There is the danger that you may be impacting one of your own existing OS drives, and you want to make sure, perhaps with a nice pretty graphical user interface, or just generally with the options included with the program, that you know what you're doing and it's being done the way you want it. And for that setup, unsurprisingly, EaseUS has a tool for that. Now, again, they've gone to their own page today. They do make recommendations for other methods, some of which we talked about today. What they also have is their own partition master application. And again, much like the previous app, if you choose to download it, it downloads. You install it just like you would any other installer application. Goes in nice and easy. But the key point here is, in order to take advantage of the secure erase, you don't need to have the paid version. So if you head over, we'll just exit the recovery of that drive, close that down, go into here, and as you can see, we've already installed it. If you run that application there, opens up here in the background. It's going to quickly check the background. Now again, you can go ahead and get a licensed version. There are lots of bells and whistles and features that you can choose to use if you wish, and you can use it to create partitions, move over your OS onto another drive, to make a bootable drive like you would in Rufus. There's lots of other things you can do, but what we want to do is erase, and as you can see, we are not using the premium version here. I recommend you check out the things that it can do, and as you can see, unlike before when we're using command line or talking about a boot disk when things are a bit difficult to read, we can clearly see our Toshiba drive there, and what you need to do is simply right click and select wipe. And what this will do is then allow you to wipe, and it will 0 over, or 0 or 1 over the individual sectors. But more importantly, you can choose to do multiple wipes. I would recommend a minimum of 3 wipes over that disk in order to wipe that drive. But for now, I'm just going to show you one just to give you some idea about how it runs. It then adds that job to the list of jobs down here. So if you wanted to do other things, cloning the disk, converting the disk onto a master boot record disk or on just a general storage drive, if you want to manage some of those partitions and change some of the partitions between them, create buildable media or some of the other options that are built into it, you can add all of those to an existing workflow, and when you're ready, go ahead and execute the range of tasks like so. As you can see, now it's going to wipe that drive. It's going to make its way through the entire drive. And this, given it's an 8 gig drive, the amount of time this will take is going to be variable. But I will say, at the moment, I would give this maybe 15 minutes, and as you can see, it's going to count through. If we wished, we could go ahead and shut down the computer after the process is completed. But what I'm going to do is fast forward now to the completion of this task, and then we're going to reuse the EaseUS data recovery tool to see if we can still see the content of that drive. Let's fast forward. And there you go. After what was maybe the loudest noise in the world that totally ruined my coffee, I can say that the drive has finished its erase. Once again, I do recommend you do for at least 2 to 3 layers minimum of wipe on the drive in order to make sure it's all gone. But we're going to go ahead and check if this drive's done now. So we're going to click new. As we can see, it's not changed here because we already had the drive erased when we received it, but it didn't look like it was secure erased. So while we got that up on there, we can make our way back into EaseUS data recovery wizard there. Let's get that open. We'll double check that it is seeing that drive, and then what we'll do is we'll try and do another recovery on this disk. So let's go ahead, refresh the drive information. There's our drive there. It's completely wiped all partitions. Everything is just gone. It is a bare bones wasteland of data. So let's go ahead and see what's on this disk. And nothing. Again, we could wait and go through the whole 100%, but as you've seen several times in this video and others, generally at least a folder structure, if it's there, would have been revealed to us by now. But as you can see, there is no data on there. The partitions have been wiped, the entire structure is gone, and that drive has been secure erased. So the big takeaway from this video, of course, if we hark back to that intro there, is it worth buying those second-hand drives? And I would say, depending on your setup, yes. Definitely not the USB drives, notwithstanding the terrible capacities that are available to you on these. But when you're looking at second-hand SSDs, and obviously durability is a factor, in those scenarios, then I think at the very least you can say that these drives do serve a purpose in terms of getting very affordable storage. Indeed, if we go ahead and take one of these drives now, connect it into our docking station, what we can do is wait just a moment for that drive to appear, and once that drive's appeared, what we can do is make our way into Crystal Disk Info, and from Crystal Disk Info, click yes, and then from there you can use this. Again, another completely free tool that you can find online. There is the SSD, that 120 gig that we've just put inside our docking station, and you can find out more about the power on hours of this drive, how long the drive has been on, and ultimately how many power ons it's had in its lifespan. You can find out more information about the durability and the health of this drive and what it has gone through, and that works for any SATA drive you connect to your system, including those, as you can see, via a USB dock. But this has been buying second-hand drives, is it worth it, and how to secure erase. Again, thanks again to EaseUS for sponsoring today's video. Again, there's links towards both secure erase and their partition wizard tool there, and of course go over and check out that free data recovery tool, and if you're a SanDisk affected user, you can find out more there. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. Links in the description. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.